it's time to run your Flutter upgrade command because Flutter 3.35 and Dart 3.9 has just been released, and in this video we are going to take a look at the changelog together, so stay with me. Hi there, this is Imaneo. Welcome to my channel. So in this channel we talk about Flutter, software engineering, game development, and different things. So in this video we are going to look at the Flutter 3.35 changelog and also Dart 3.9. So we don't have much on the Dart side, but in the Flutter side we have something to talk about. So let's get started. I'm going to go through the Medium article that we have for Flutter 3.35. And by the way, I will put the link into the description, just like always. Yeah, the first thing that you can see is that the web hot reload is now stable and enabled by default. So if you don't know what hot reload is, it is something like this. So suppose that you have a web application, we have a very simple Flutter app here. We have homepage and the second page. So when you click on the open second page, we have the second page, and here, for example, you can change the color of the text here. For example, we can run copy with colors.red. Now if you click on this button, it just changes the color. But before that, the hot reload functionality was not working. For example, if you are at this page and you click on the hot reload, it just restarts the whole application and it just opens the home page again, because the hot restart functionality works when you do the hot reload. But after the Flutter 3.35, the hot reload functionality just works like Android and iOS. So for example, you can change the color and do the hot reload. You can, I don't know, change the text. Yeah, it's a good news. And here they say that our goal is to provide a seamless and consistent hot reload experience on all platforms. And the other thing is wasm dry run. So it is just, when you try to build your application or compile your application using JS, JavaScript, it just tries to run a wasm dry run. So what it does, it just tries to compile the project using the WebAssembly and just lets you know if there are any issues. So it helps you to check the readiness of your project for WebAssembly. So it does nothing with the project, but it just tries to check if your project is ready for WebAssembly or not. That's it. And if you want to disable that, you can just run no wasm dry run to disable this functionality. But I suggest you to keep this feature on because it helps you to move quicker towards the WebAssembly. And here it says that previously you had to add this flag web experimental hot reload to be able to use hot reload functionality on the web, but it is no longer necessary or needed. You can just remove this flag because at the moment the hot reload is built in, so it is enabled by default. And here is the flag that we were talking about. If you want to disable the hot reload, you can use this flag, no web experimental hot reload, to disable it for now. If you have a workflow or if you are in some situation that you don't want to use hot reload, it's okay, you can just disable it. And here we have an important topic. So as you know, you can run the Flutter application using a web server. So what's the difference between Flutter run-d Chrome and Flutter run-d web server? So the point is that Flutter has some integration with the Google Chrome. So it just can run the Flutter on Google Chrome using Flutter run-d Chrome. So it just has some integration that allows you to have hot reload, for example, or other integrations. But you are free to use other browsers. So for example, when you run Flutter run-d web server, it just runs the Flutter application on a URL on your local host. So I think it opens it on a random port or a specific port, I don't know. but it is available to use it in any web browser that you have. For example, if you have Firefox, Safari, or anything. So for example, you can run Flutter run-t web server, and as you can see, it is live on localhost 61158. So it's here. For example, I can use my Safari to open the Flutter application. Let me put it here. Yeah. And the point is that in this mode, the Flutter hot reload doesn't work. So they are going to work on it to make it available on the web server as well. And here we have the framework changes. So we have some improvements on the semantics. So as you know, semantics are some accessibility tools that allows people with accessibility to use the application. For example, we have screen readers that they can see what we have on the screen. And yeah, so these are just the improvements. And here we have some changes on the material and Cupertino. So there are just new components that are added into the material and Cupertino widgets. We have, for example, drop-down menu, form field, and we have a scroll level navigation rail. So navigation rail is the widget that we have on the side, so on the left side or maybe right side. And it is now scroll level. And we have navigation drawer, header and footer. And we have Cupertino expansion tile that is just like this, as you see. And here we have some polishing changes to the Cupertino widgets to use super ellipse. So this is a topic that we talked in the previous video, in the previous release. So it is a new type of roundness around the rectangles that Apple introduced. So the Flutter widgets are going to get updated. I mean, they got updated in this release. So they are now very similar to the native widgets that we have on the iOS. So as you know, in Flutter, everything is drawn using the canvas and the Flutter itself. So for example, you can have Cupertino widgets on Android or material widgets on iOS. So that's why the Flutter team needs to update all the widgets to be similar to the widgets that we have on the native parts, for example, Android native and iOS native. Yeah, so these are the polishing changes. And here we have some changes on the slivers. So as you know, slivers are the scroll level things that you can do crazy things with them. For example, you have a header, and when you scroll a list, the header shrinks and it just stays on the top. And when you get back, it just expands and you can see the header. Or for example, you have a floating action button on the bottom right of the screen, and you want to hide it when you scroll down and you want to show it when you scroll up. So these are handled using the slivers, and now they have added a feature to handle the Z order of the slivers. So this way you can handle the painting priority of the components using the Z order. And yeah, here we have some improvements on the full screen dialogues and form improvements. For example, in form field, we have an on-reset callback. I mean, these are small changes. But here we have the multi-window support. So as you know, the canonical team, the company or the organization behind the Ubuntu, they are working on the multi-window support for Flutter, as well as for apps that are going to run on Ubuntu. They are working on it, and it seems they added some foundational logic to create and update Windows on macOS and Windows. So it is very interesting that at first they started working on the Windows and macOS. I don't know why, maybe there are more standards over there, and later they're going to support the Linux as well. And yeah, but it seems they added all the foundational logics, and in the next release, I think we are going to have some experimental features of the multi-window. So if you don't know what is this feature, it is like, for example, if you are on Chrome, you can have different windows. You see, these are different instances or different windows of the same application. So This way they can work separately, but they're still working on the same application, so they are just having different windows. So they are working on implementing this feature to the Flutter. And here we have some improvements on the text input and selection refinements. So for example, we have a new introduced gesture, position gesture details, and we have iOS single line scrolling. So in iOS, when you have a single line text field, I think you cannot scroll, you can just drag and hold the finger and then you can scroll. So I think they just implemented that behavior or fixed the behavior. And we have the Android home and end key support. And here we have a very important change in my opinion. So the point is that they are going to decouple the Flutter's design libraries. So as you know, we have Cupertino and Material design libraries inside the Flutter. So now they are thinking about decoupling them from the core library of Flutter. So I know that it is initiated by the Flutter community. So I think the link is here. Yeah, so here they talked about the reasons, and by the way, it's a long thread. If you want, you can read it by yourself, but I'm going to give you an overview. And also here we have the documentation or the paper that is more official. Yeah, it could be like this. You have to import the Material and Cupertino widgets or packages. And yeah, the point is that, as you know, at the moment we have 4 major releases for Flutter every year. Every quarter we are going to have a release, a major release. And this way it makes it very hard to have quicker updates for Material widgets and Cupertino widgets. And when you separate them from the core library or repository, it could be very easier to contribute and to update the widgets and have a new version. So they are going to be decoupled from the Flutter release cycle, and they can have their own release cycle. So this way you will get faster updates, and it can be easier to update because the code is isolated from the Flutter framework, and these two repositories are only focused on the Flutter and Cupertino. So for example, Apple, if they want, they can contribute only to the Cupertino widgets. So it is an isolated area that is only containing the Cupertino widgets. Or for example, Android developers can just open the Material library or repository and update the Material widgets. So I see this a positive move. So they are going to do it later, but yeah, they are going to separate the packages. And also it makes the development on the core library easier because it is now only the core functionalities of the Flutter, and you have less code. When you have less code, it's easier to update and work on the code base. Yeah, so I see this very positive move towards the future. And here we have the iOS changes. So we have iOS 26 and Xcode 26 compatibility. And here we have some Android changes. We have this sensitive content protection. As you know, in some applications, you cannot take the screenshot from the page, or if you try to share your screen on Android phone, some pages are blacked. So other people cannot see them because they are containing sensitive content. For example, in your banking apps, or I don't know, when you are opening your password manager and these kind of things. So in Flutter, you can now use sensitive content widget on top of your widget tree of your page. And if you are targeting Android API 35 and later, this feature works. So this widget protects your screen from the screenshot, from the screen share, and this kind of thing. So if you are working on a banking app, or I don't know, password manager, or these kind of things that you are showing security or sensitive content on the screen, you can use sensitive content widget on top of the page. So this way users are safe. And here we have the engine changes. So as I see, we have some improvements. For example, on the engine, we have app startup time optimization. And on in-player, we have some improvements. I mean, they are very low level. For example, MSAA is for some anti-aliasing algorithms. We can read them if you're interested. And yeah, I'm happy that they are making it more optimized. And here we have a memory leak that is fixed on video player. And on iOS, we have some crash fixes on web view when you wrap it with R super ellipses that I was talking about. It is the new way that Apple makes the widgets round. And here we have some small Android changes. For example, the template project migrated to Android 24. There are some crash fixes. There are some fixes on fragment shaders for OpenGLES. And also, it seems we had an upside down fragment shader passed on the in player, and they also fixed that. And also on macOS, we have another fix. And yeah, here we have DevTools and IDEs. It seems they are working on the MCP server, and they just enabled it as an experimental feature on the Dart SDK. So if you upgrade your Flutter, you are also upgrading the Dart SDK, and this way you are able to use MCP server. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, I think. And the point is that it is a protocol or a standard between the AI and LLMs, and also the frameworks, the languages, and these kind of things. So they can provide more context to the LLMs. For example, in Dart, they are working to implement these standards and protocols to allow the LLMs have a good understanding of the code base, of the widgets, of the language features, and these kind of things. So as a result, when you are using an LLM, it can have a good understanding of the code base. So it could be an enhancement on the way you are working with LLMs. Yeah, so it is experimental. You can use it. For example, these are the examples that you can do. For example, you can ask the LLMs or AI to fix runtime errors. So they can just inspect the widget tree and find for example, render flex overflow or these kind of runtime errors, because they have the good understanding of the code base and also the framework. And they can also manage the dependencies. For example, you can ask to upgrade a package, then fix the breaking changes and these kind of things. And yeah, again, it's a good step in my opinion, because this way you are able to continue faster with the LLMs, because they have good understanding of the code base and the framework that you are working with. And here they say that how can you use it. Yeah, for example, here you see that we have overflow error or exception or render flux error, and the LLM knows about the underlying features of the Flutter and have deep understanding of the widgets, and now it can have a good fix for you. So I think it's suggested to use fitted bugs. Yeah, so it's a very good step. And yeah, here we have the DevTools update. So it seems they work on the UX and performance. And here we have the experimental widget previews. Again, in my opinion, it is a very good and important update. So as you know, in the modern UI toolkits, for example, in Jetpack Compose, we have this widget preview thing or feature that you can preview your standalone or a specific widget in the IDE itself. So for example, you can add an annotation on top of the composable method or function, and it can just show you the specific feature that you are working on the IDE itself. So you can change the theme, you can change the locale, you can change the text size of the text size that is coming from the OS. And this way you can you don't need to run the application to see the result. You can just change the code and see the result on the IDE side by side. And Flutter is also going to implement that feature. So at the moment they added a feature that you can add the @preview annotation on top of your function, and it accepts a theme, a brightness, and I guess it has more properties such as locale and these kind of things. And this way you can just check your widget standalone in an isolated area in your web. So for example, here we have a column, and you can iterate over your widget. You don't need to run the whole application to just test your standalone widget. You can have it separately, and you can, for example, check it in dark mode, in light mode. And yeah, it is really helpful and handy when you are working with the designers. So you can just sit together and iterate on the standalone widgets. They said that later they are planning to have the IDE integration, so they want to put the widget inside the IDE. So suppose that you are designing a specific widget, and when you change, you see the result on the IDE. So you immediately realize that how the widget looks like on the real application without running the whole application. They're also going to add the generic theme support. So as you know, when they are going to separate the material and Cupertino, they should do some ways to have generic themes to manage this use case. For example, when there is no material and Cupertino, they should have a generic theme support. And yeah, by the way, when they introduce the generic theme support, you are able to implement your own theme, for example, for Ubuntu, for macOS, and they can just follow the generic abstraction rules, and you can have a new theme system or design system in Flutter. And here are some useful links. If you are interested in Widget Preview, you can check the experimental. And yeah, here we have some speed improvements on the analysis servers. So for example, these commands now run faster. Dart format, Dart doc, and Dart analyze. So you can see the difference. For example, Dart analyze used to take 19 seconds. Now it takes around 13 seconds. So it's an improvement. And we have the plugin updates for the Android Studio, JetBrains IDs, and I think VS Code, or I'm not sure. I think the VS Code plugin updates are separated from Flutter. I don't know. Maybe it is handled by community. Yeah, but we have new update for the plugins that are used in Android Studio and JetBrains. And here we have some breaking changes. The first one is the change that they are going to add data on these names. For example, we have app bar theme data, bottom app bar theme data. So it is for the consistency, and you just need to add the data postfix to these names. I think they are not yet deprecated, but you can use theme data instead of these names. And here we have some changes on the radio widgets, for example, radio, Cupertino radio, and radio list style. So I think now you can wrap them with a radio group, and the group value and the unchanged properties, they have been deprecated. And I think you can have these two callbacks inside the radio group. So I haven't used them in the past projects that I had, but I don't know. Yeah, I think they have moved these two callbacks to the radio group. So it seems like that. And we have another breaking change. So you can no longer use form widget inside the slivers. So to do that, you need to wrap it with the sliver to box adapter widget. And here it seems we had elevation and thickness properties on the semantic configuration and semantic nodes that they have been removed because they didn't have any implementation. And also here we have another change on the drop down button form field, and the value is deprecated. So you need to use initial value instead. And yeah, so if you want to see the full migration guide and the breaking changes, you can check this link. And yeah, here they deprecated the 32-bit x86 architecture on Android. I think it does not affect you, so because it is for all devices and emulators. And yeah, but now they are not going to support this architecture anymore. And here they have deprecated the IDE support for old Flutter SDKs. Those are that are older than 3.13. So as you know, at the moment we are 3.35, so it is very old. If you haven't upgraded your Flutter version, you can just upgrade it, and they are not going to be supported on the IDEs anymore. And here we have the minimum Android SDK change. It is now API 24, which means Android 7. So if you modify this value in your build.gradle, it should be higher than 24. So for example, if you have 21 or something like that, it should be get higher. So the minimum version that is supported is 24. And here are the minimum Android tools that you need to have. For example, the Gradle version should be at least 870, and AGP Android Gradle plugin should be 860, and you should have at least Java 17. It seems here they deprecated this thing in the pubspec.yaml plugin class. I don't know what it does because I haven't published any plugin, but if you are a plugin maintainer, please update your pubspec.yaml and make sure you don't have this line in your pubspec file. Or maybe you can read more about it, because to be honest, I have no idea what is it. And it's better to read it before doing anything with it. And yeah, but it seems it's going to be removed in the next version of Flutter. And yeah, so that's it for the Flutter part. Okay, here is the article for Dart 3.9. I'm going to take a quick look on the changes. So here we have an update on the null safety. So I asked ChatGPT to give me an update to understand what happened. So suppose that you have this function, you have a string that is nullable. So you checked if it is null, you just return the function. And here again, you checked if the input is null, you are going to have a logic. So you know that it is a dead code because it's not possible to run this code because you already returned the function if the input is null. So again, you check if the input is null, you are going to do something else. So this is a dead code. And before that, it was not showing a warning to you, but after this release, if you set the SDK to 3.9.0, you will get a warning for this code, because the compiler knows that it is a dead code and it's not going to run, and you will get a warning. And here we have an update on a soundness update, so you can check the example. Here it said that, for example, suppose that you have this container with this getter, and you know that the type is a generic type, but you are not sure what is it. And in the past, you could call the invocation, so you could do this. But at the moment, in this release, you are gonna get an error or warning or something like that. And here we have the MCP server that I already talked about. So this is the model context protocol for the LLMs. So it's a way that they communicate together to have a deep understanding of the Dart language and the Flutter framework. And here we have the faster CLI commands like Dart analyze and Dart fix. And here we have an update on the pub client. So you can depend on a package using the Git URL, and now it supports the tag pattern. So for example, if a library has versions like v201 or v something else, you can define the tag and you can have the version here. And again, we talked about this deprecation and breaking changes. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe the channel and share it with your friends. So stay tuned and see you next time. Bye.